evening. I'm going to call this meeting to order. Thank you again for being very patient with our technical difficulties. Sometimes things work the way they're supposed to, and sometimes they don't. So I'd like to welcome you all to our meeting tonight. And Kim, will you please call the roll?
Mr. Austin.
Present.
Ms. Fletch. Here. Mr. Webb.
Here.
Vice Mayor Peterson.
Here.
And Mayor Woods.
Here. And now I would like to ask Councilmember Donna Quetch to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Now I'd like to invite Stephen Bednar from the Bond Church to lead us in prayer.
Thank you, Council. Let's pray. Our Father in heaven, we thank you for another beautiful evening. Thank you for the coolness of this place, for the ways in which you provide for us. Help us to remember and to think upon how you have provided for us in so many ways, our families, our friends, this community, your beautiful nature that we're able to enjoy, that people come to this town to appreciate. Help us to honor you with what we say, with our thoughts, with how we treat one another. You have called us, commanded us to love one another. And so I pray that we would do that. Help us to be a people and to be a town that shows itself through love. I thank you for this council and for their willingness to serve, for the time and effort that they put into serving us, the citizens in this community, every week. I pray that you would bless them for the ways in which they serve us. Help us to submit to them as we ought to. Help us to show them respect and honor, the respect and honor that they deserve for their positions, and the respect and honor that they deserve as fellow humans and image bearers. Pray for this meeting tonight, that what happens would be honoring to you, be pleasing to you, that in it people would be respectful, and that there would be peace in the decisions that are made, that there would be just a cohesion of this council and the people in this room, that they would accept what's happening, and that this council would look out for what is best for this town. I thank you for the love that you have shown toward us in Christ. I pray that you would use us to reflect that. We thank you for this time. I pray that you would bless it. In Jesus' name, amen.
The next item on the agenda is the approval of the agenda. I would entertain a motion to approve the agenda.
Madam Mayor, I'd like to move that we approve the draft agenda and that it be modified to include under the latter section, section S, closed session. And I suppose it's more of an amplification that it would be a pure amendment, but I'd like to have a closed session under Virginia Code 2.2, 3711A8 for consultation with legal counsel employed or retained by this body regarding specific legal matters which require the provision of legal advice by counsel. And further, as the option is given in the draft agenda for a closed session for the purposes of considering applications for appointment for positions on the Economic Development Authority, Sustain Abingdon, and/or Sinking Springs Cemetery Committee, I would like for us to choose to go into closed session on that matter also.
We have a motion to approve draft agenda with the addition under item S of a closed session. Do we have a second? Okay, so the motion was by Mr. Austin, the second was by Ms. Quetch. Do we have any discussion? If there's no discussion, Kim, would you please call the roll?
Mr. Austin.
Aye.
Ms. Fletch. Aye. Mr. Webb.
Aye.
Vice Mayor Peterson.
Aye.
And Mayor Woods.
Aye. Moving on to the approval of the minutes from our August 7th, 2023 meeting. Do we have a motion to approve the minutes?
So moved.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Is there any discussion? So the motion was made by Mr. Austin. It was seconded by Mr. Webb. If there's no discussion, can we please call the roll?
Mr. Austin.
Aye.
Ms. Swash. Aye. Mr. Webb.
Aye.
Vice Mayor Anderson. And Mayor.
This question is still a mistake. It should be-
Oh, I'm sorry.
You're right. Change your vote. Yes, ma'am.
It's gonna be repealed.
Aye. The next section on the agenda is public comments. We have 2 people signed up for public comments tonight. I'd just like to remind you that comments are limited to 3 minutes per person, and there will be a light up here. And so if you would please come forward and state your name and your address. And the first one is Mr. Butch Hutchins. Right there, the microphone. Thank you.
Butch Hutchins, address 970 Hillman Highway, lot 16, Abingdon.
What can we do for you tonight?
I've got a couple concerns. One was the rise in the cost of the trash pickup for the town, going from $17 to $30 a month. And I asked them at the sewer department if they could just come and get my can, because that's just too much of an increase. And I'd take the trash out myself, and they said no, that it was made mandatory that everybody in the town still have the trash pickup, which that, and I think about everybody in town agrees that's a little too much of an increase for trash. My other concern was, why did the town go through and paint all the lines in the road and then turn around before the paint got dry, dig the roads up and repave them, and then have to turn around and repaint them again? It just didn't make a whole lot of sense to me. Something like that.
Thank you. We also have Mr. David Wallace.
Good evening, I'm David Wallace. I live at 377 Augusta Drive. Been there since '96. One of the first people I met was Dwayne when we moved here. Good man. I'm here because of exit 17. I've been talking about exit 17 since we moved here. Derek was smart, he got out of the neighborhood before it got to where it is now. My concern is I don't think VDOT is going to listen to me, so I'm hoping that the town can say something. Conservatively, I've come out Country Club onto Cummings Street conservatively 10,000 times. So I have an idea of what they could do there. They didn't consult anybody in that area. So what we have now is everyone coming out of Winterham, the golf course or whatever, we come down to the traffic light now. There's no right-hand turn lane, there's no left-hand turn lane, there's just 2. So if anybody is wanting to turn south onto Cummings Street, we're all gonna sit there for 2.5 minutes because we can't make a simple right-hand turn into town. Where is the thinking there? And now they've installed a pretty large guardrail, so I don't know how easy it would be, to remedy the situation, but it just, when you're spending, what, $25–30 million, I think a little more for everyone that's gonna be using it. That's that, but another thing, and I've been talking about this since we moved here. exit 14, exit 17, exit 19. Not everybody who gets off there is going downtown. A lot of people just get off for gas, food, whatever. It's not a very good first impression when you pull off and when you're gonna go under 81, there's weeds growing up where all the concrete work, there's a lot of litter. And I've asked this before, you know, with the town, and I don't know, the answer I've gotten every time is, well, that's VDOT. And I think we know what VDOT is going to do. Do we need to have volunteers get out there and do it? I think then Abingdon deserves better. The town residents deserve better, and our guests deserve better. And on the amber light, I'm out of here.
Thank you.
Thank you. You're welcome.
Okay, now we have a proclamation on behalf of the Veterans Advisory Board recognizing September 10th through 16th, 2023 as National Suicide Prevention Week. And Mr. Alston is going to read up the proclamation for us.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Whereas suicide is a devastating tragedy that leaves loved ones with unanswered questions and families missing a piece of their souls, wishing for more time together. Acknowledging suicide and the impact it has on our communities is a first step to understanding how it can be prevented more effectively. And whereas in the United States, suicide transcends every aspect of society, in particular service members, veterans, and law enforcement officials. Veterans have roughly 93% higher risk of suicide than the public. And whereas in the United States, over 49,000 people died by suicide in 2022, and whereas together we can reduce the stigmatization of mental health issues, learn how to respond to suicide risk, and offer individuals and populations most impacted the essential care they need when a crisis arises. And whereas together we can save lives. On this week of commendation and action, we commit to studying the risk factors associated with suicide and to making mental health care accessible and affordable. And whereas to those experiencing emotional distress, please know that you are loved and not alone. There is hope and there is help. I encourage you to call or text 988 to reach the National Suicide and Crisis Lifeline. And now, therefore, be it resolved that Amanda Pillion, Mayor for the Town of Abingdon, does hereby designate September 10th through the 16th, 2023 as National Suicide Prevention Week in the Town of Abingdon, Virginia.
Thank you. So we have members of the Veterans Advisory Committee. Do you all want to come forward and have a picture made with the proclamation?
Yes, Madam Mayor.
That'll work.
The lock.
On that, is that why? Oh, so it's not my fault. It's only been 2.5 years, but I still can't make it. I heard that you saw my husband Saturday. That means election. Okay, so we have. Thank you. Thank you
Chair.
so much. You're welcome. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, we have a public hearing, a couple of public, well, we have public hearings to address. And I understand that we don't have anybody signed up to speak during the public hearings. First, we are going to talk about a proposed special use permit for 2 comprehensive sign, programs. I guess this is all in public hearing, I apologize. And, am I on it?
I think they're separate.
Oh, they're separate? Okay,
Yeah, we actually have 3 public hearings.
Okay.
total,
okay, sorry.
so- No.
Okay. So Mayana is going to explain this.
All right, so let's see. So the first one that we have tonight is for a special use permit for a comprehensive sign plan for 238 West Main Street. So I will explain it. The applicant is also here to speak to the project. So, Midstream Properties and Woolworth Construction have requested approval of a special use permit to add signs to the property, which is going to be called Abingdon Commons. If we could go to the next slide, please. So, what is a master sign plan? That's probably the first thing to just answer that question. So basically, if you have a project and you have multiple signs and you wanna come in and get them all approved at one time, you go through a master sign plan process. This allows, because all of these are in the entrance corridor, it basically allows you to get them approved through this process, and then as each of your tenants come in and wants to put up a sign, they're just coming to the planning department. So they're not actually having to come back for every single sign in front of the planning commission. Now, if somebody did want to come in and do a different sign, of course, they can always come back to the planning commission and ask that in the future. But it basically allows a developer to come in and look at all the signage together. A couple of meetings ago, we had one for the Berry signs, where they were looking at signage out there. So you all have seen this before. So this is gonna be for the marketplace that will occupy what was the Carter Bank and Trust building and now will be called Abingdon Commons. So the signs that they are proposing, on this first slide, you'll see that there is an archway over the development, a symbol in the middle, and then there's an existing sign on Main Street called Abingdon Commons. You can go to the next slide. Along this front area, they are proposing the words Abingdon Commons. As you can see along the top, they're also proposing lighting. And you'll see later that that is one of the conditions that we have in place. If you could go to the next slide. Also, along each of the entranceways and archways here, you'll see, and when the applicant comes up, he'll give you more of the advertisement for the businesses, but you can see here that they are proposing the different types of uses that could be on there. Now, you, as well as the planning commission, are approving what the words say, but you are approving the design and the style, and in this case, they proposed a palette color. Next slide, please. In addition to that, they are looking at a couple of additional signs. So you'll see here, where you've got sort of a long, image in front of you. There are 2 signs that will be above the pergola. In the corner up here where it says Abingdon Commons, they're proposing that to be a design for basically a small sign on the front of the structure that will identify the different businesses. And then I don't know how many of you have looked at where Tumbling Creek Cider is currently, but at the moment, it is back here in this, what was a drive-through. So they came to us, they had to leave their previous lease, and so we found a way to basically have a temporary location for them there, which has turned out great for them.
Where would that sign be, the common sign here, where would that be?
Okay, so it is gonna be, if you look at the sign here with the Route 11 and all of that,
Yeah.
it's basically gonna sit next to the tree that's there in that corner. And I put this image up too, because we have discussed with the applicants moving this sign, which basically sits directly in front of their business at the moment, and actually pushing it more where you see the flag and the parking direction
Yeah.
sign there, pushing it basically to there. We worked with Public Works and looked at the VDOT standards, and there's still enough distance between where that light is and the intersection to actually move it. Of course, we've asked the applicants to do that at their cost, because it is a request that they're having, and it's kind of more for aesthetics than anything else on the building. So, with that, they took that to the planning commission, and the only item that the planning commission asked for was that a final, lighting plan be submitted to the community development department, because none of the images that we see here provided any idea of where lighting would go. So the planning department will approve that if you all approve it tonight. When we did a roll call vote, it was all in favor. We had 5 members attend on E28. So with that, the applicant is here. If you would like to ask me any questions or them any questions, they can answer.
Do you have any questions?
Come up.
Sure. So I'd like to open the public hearing, please.
Good evening, council members. My name is Nathan Burke, 24383 Walden Road, Abingdon, Virginia. Diana already said pretty much everything that there is to be said in a much more eloquent way than I could. So with that, do we have any questions?
When do we think this construction will be like completed?
That's a great question. Thank you for that. I appreciate it. We're hoping to be done with the upper market section in October. The lower section, which is where you see the pergola, we're hoping to have that finished up this winter. So we're pushing full steam ahead. Got some pavement down. Yeah. Tenants we're starting to move the tenant fixtures and shelving in this month. So we're shooting for that October. We're excited.
Will you continue to use the drive-through as it's currently being used, or will that move into the main structure?
So the current tenant, which is Elm Creek Cidery, will move into the main structure, and there will be hopefully another tenant backfilling in where they were. We have a few different options to discuss what that might be. We don't have any signed leases for that space yet. But the upper section, the main building, is fully leased, and just have some really
How many businesses do you have
that
are going to be going in there?
Yeah, so there will be about 8 new businesses. Whether that's brand, some of those are brand new, others are businesses that are opening second locations. So it's going to be neat. I'm really excited. You'll have Delta Blues Barbecue, which they currently have a location on State Street. They're moving in. Obviously, Tumbling Creek. They'll kind of be occupying that lower section, and then you'll have Blue Hill Market will be the main tenant on the upper market section. They're dramatically expanding their offerings, and you'll have a bakery, a cafe, gelato and ice cream, cheese and wine, and lots of other good stuff.
This is not really a pertinent question, maybe it is, but
Yeah.
with the parking lot there, by the way, the structure is absolutely gorgeous. I mean, just top notch. It looks great. But with the parking lot there, did you lose a lot of space when you?
We didn't lose any
Great.
parking spaces.
Fantastic.
Yeah. That parking lot was kind of an awkward size, so there was a really wide center lane. We basically shrank that center lane, and were able to expand the building without losing any parking spots. I think we have over 30 spaces, which, that's quite a bit for downtown. Yeah.
And the temporary cidery looks wonderful.
Thank you.
It's
Yeah,
really cool.
that worked out really great. That was kind of we had to kind of adjust really quickly to meet their needs, and so far I think they've been really happy with that, so that worked out for everyone.
It looks like it was on purpose and planned that way all
Right.
along. It's pretty awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, we're worried that they'll just be so happy there that they're not going to move into the space we're renovating. No, I think it's going to be really neat. Whenever we're ready, I would welcome any of you guys to come. I'll give you a tour.
Thank you.
Fantastic.
Okay. So if we have no discussion for the public hearing, then,
So does anybody have a sign question?
yes, does anybody have a question about the
Yeah,
signs?
I'm happy to answer. Come on, Cam.
You know, I would say this, kudos, oftentimes you see people spending this kind of coin and then skimping on the signage, and obviously you
Right.
have not done that.
Yeah.
So kudos for really taking pride in the signage for
Yeah,
the
we-
structure. Yeah.
We want it to be, we want it to be modest and something that kind of matches the architecture of the building, made out of durable materials, so something that accents the structure.
Clearly, it's a painstaking effort to keep it relevant to the building, so yeah,
Thanks.
kudos. That's a signed question, right, sir? Good job.
Check. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so do I close each open hearing? I was missing a page of my agenda, that's why I was confused. Okay. Does anybody else who's present, would anybody like to speak in this open hearing? If not, then I will close the public hearing for this matter. I will open the public hearing for the next matter, which is another sign program at 370 East Main Street, advertising the entryway to the shared parking area of Sweet Bay Brewing Company, Bike Shop, an adventure retail store, and the Girl in the Raven.
Okay, so similar to the previous one, but there's some differences here. Hugh Belcher, the owner, Killian Hagerty, the applicant, have requested approval of a special use permit to add 2 monument signs to the property to advertise the entryway into the proposed development called East Village. The primary focus is to unify the existing businesses around a shared parking area, and there will be a monument sign on Main Street and a monument sign on Park Street. So if you could go to the next slide. So here's what the proposed signage looks like. So a little bit of the background. As you all know, this one's a little bit different when you're talking about unifying signage. There's existing visible signage for Sweet Bay Brewing Company, Brazen Raven Coffee Roasters, the Girl in the Raven, and those businesses all currently exist. And as part of this master plan, looking at signage, we are including those signs. So if those businesses were ever to shift, move, a new business were to come in, essentially the square footage that those signs currently occupy would continue to be the square footage that they could also have at their locations and on their structure. So we're not replacing them, we're not taking away with the requests that you have before you tonight. What you are doing, if you could switch to the next slide, please, is, could we go to the next slide, please? And there should be something that's on each of your, might be easier to look at it there than even on the overhead. But really what a master sign plan's purpose is to unify an area. So if you had a new subdivision coming in, or if you saw from the previous application, if it's something new, it's much easier to unify. When it's something that's been there for a while, you really have to reach outside the box and think about it in a much more creative manner. So because it's a special use permit, both the planning commission and then you as the town council can add conditions. So that's kind of where your power lies, because you're saying, yes, it's something that could be allowed, but only allowed if these certain things are done. So let's just kind of lead you through the site. On the front, on East Main Street, you'll see the location for the monument sign in red. It's a red square. That building that is at 370 East Main Street is a little bit of a mix of right now. But right adjacent to that is the Girl in the Raven. So the idea is that traffic will come in off of Main Street onto a one-way roadway, an easement, that will go between the Girl in the Raven and the property known as 370 East Main Street. Because that traffic will be one way, several of the conditions that we work together between staff and the applicant and the planning commission is ensuring that the traffic that exists at 370 East Main Street can actually get through the property. So we wouldn't want to put the burden of basically sort of creating a landlocked environment and saying, hey, you're going one way, but if you want to get all the way out from your apartment or shop or whatever the case may be at 370, you've got to wind your way all the way back through the brewery property and out Park Street. We requested that an egress be actually put along the edge of the Girl and the Raven. So 370 East Main Street, you come in one way, you can continue onto the brewery property, or you can make a left and you can go out the Girl and the Raven property over to Deadmore. So that was the first request. The next idea was, okay, we still want traffic to come in. We want it to come into the brewery. So you'll see that there are 3 properties essentially located here on this drawing. There's where the brewery production occurs in the large warehouse, and then there's the buildings that occupy more of the actual retail space for the brewery. We had proposed for staff to have an easement that came all the way out to Park Street. At the Planning Commission level, they also requested that there be an easement between what is basically the brewery's property and what is the owner next door, which is AMT. So again, traffic will come in, you could make a left-hand turn and go between the Girl and the Raven over to Deadmore. You could continue on to the brewery property, and then you can make a left and also go out to Deadmore there. Or if you wanted to, you could come all the way back to the back property, which is on Park Street. On Park Street, there is a structure that is currently vacant, and there is a proposal there it's called the Ice House property, and there is a proposal there for both a coffee roastery, a bike shop, maybe an adventure outfit type of shop. And so with that, the access is actually 2-way. So you could come in off of Park Street, go past the Ice House, go into the brewery property, or you could come out of the brewery property and go past the Ice House and access Park Street. So that is how these parcels that are all separate from each other are going to be looked at as one cohesive development. And again, that is the reasoning behind the idea that you create the East Village and you put the signage, and it is a cohesive, comprehensive sign plan. A little more difficult when you have properties that are already in play, but they were able to pull off a design. With that, staff had a number of conditions that the Planning Commission discussed at length, and they did ultimately request that they be part of what they are proposing to you all tonight. So I will read them into the record. When we get to the actual motion, you may want to ask more questions about them. The first is that the request was for 15-foot wide easements, and when Nathan gets up here, he can explain to you why he's looking at 12-foot. We were requesting a 15-foot wide easement that linked the parcels together. Submit for review that there's a permanent easement between the existing AMT property and the brewery, because that wasn't part of the original request from staff. That the permanent easement must identify that this area is for vehicular and pedestrian movement, not only on the recorded document, but on the physical site. So it's not going to be, there needs to be signage that they will need to submit to us that shows people how to go in and out of this property. What we don't want is people coming to the edge of the brewery and trying to go out to Main Street, because that's a one-way entrance. That the permanent easement must consist of pavement, concrete, or a gravel surface and be maintained in perpetuity by the owners. That the permanent easement documentation must be signed by all the property owners. So you can see here with the document that they've provided that they have space for all the owners to sign, and that would be recorded with each of the parcels. We also are requesting that that they provide a maintenance plan for the easement, so that all the responsible parties know which part of the easement they're actually maintaining and how that will be maintained. Again, we'd love for every business to stay in perpetuity, but we want to ensure that as things move and businesses come and go, that there is that permanent record. Submit the internal directional signage for traffic flow. And then a couple of the things that we wanted to do is remove the Girl in the Raven open sign. They currently have like a breakfast, lunch, and pastry sign. As we're kind of going through a master sign plan for the town, one of the things we talk a lot about is sign clutter. And that the more signs you have does not actually increase your business, but just creates a cluttered environment that people don't know. So we're requesting that some of those signs be removed. We're also requesting that a previous sign located at 370 East Main Street be removed. We also are requesting that a parking plan be provided. So currently at 370 East Main Street, there is a parking lot, and people come and go in every direction. And so we're asking that that be diagonal to accommodate the one-way entrance, so that people are not, doesn't have a natural feel to go back to Main Street. You come in, you park, or you go on through the properties. That the driveway, okay, so the other thing is dumpsters. So we do have a few existing dumpsters on the site. When we have a new property, we always require that dumpsters are screened. If there's a property that's been at use for a number of years, they're not always screened, so we're requiring that the dumpsters be screened. And then a final lighting plan be submitted to the Community Development Department. That additional easement is gonna go across 2 parcels, and that was the last thing. So after a lengthy discussion, the roll call vote occurred, and the Planning Commission voted unanimously to approve it with the conditions identified by both them as well as the staff. So again, I can try to answer questions, or Nathan can get them up and add to your information.
Let me ask a question. I was sitting here thinking about the effects on other persons other than the businesses, and I think the signs are very appropriate and very nice, and have no problem with that. Correct me if I'm wrong, is there not a chain link fence just to the east of the fire department that prohibits people from going through?
You are correct.
If you take that out and create an easement and create a road, people who live on Park Street currently have a dead end there, so you're going to create more traffic for people on Park Street. You're going to have a through road there. You're also going to have some effect, and I know the chief is here tonight, with the fire department, because now you're going to have a 2-lane road out in front of the fire department. What, could you comment on those concerns for me, please?
Sure, and I would invite the chief to come up and add anything that he would like. I know. Welcome to the Community Development Department at my show. Okay. Yes, so that question came up at the Planning Commission,
Okay.
and we specifically talked with the chief, and he indicated that based on their location, they're not concerned about it.
Okay.
One thing, and this is further down the road because I tend to bring you all a lot of ordinance amendments, but we are looking for language that would capture streets and internal movement that are not part of subdivisions. So this truly is an easement scenario and is not a road. And the true distinction there is the fact that none of these are to the width that we require for roads. We are, the request for the 15 feet, for example, is our alley standard, which we did put some thought into how much right away we were asking. But yes, again, and I think we've discussed this in a variety of ways, yes, a savvy individual that this is now open will potentially come through here. But truly, it is the interior movement for these businesses and will not be a town street.
But the person that's going to use it, I don't
They could
care
use
whether
it.
it's called a road or an
Absolutely.
easement, they want to get
Yep.
back through there, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
so they will be. So that fence will come down. The fence that is currently used as on the other side, on the Dedmore side, would come down. The fence on the side between the 370 East Main and the brewery would also come down. And again, that's why we put a lot of the conditions in, that it be permanent and that they all sign it and that they be part of a maintenance plan to ensure that it is actually maintained.
Well, if it's an easement, it doesn't come up, as you pointed out, to the standards of a roadway in the town.
Correct.
So doesn't that create more problems for everyone if it's not up to that standard?
Well, I mean, you can talk to the applicant as to whether or not they think it will create additional problems. But, again, with the way that we have it set up here and the way that they have proposed it, it is all internal movement between parcels. So it would be really honestly no different than going into the interior part of Food City. So if you go on the outer edge where we have a road back to the Meadows, that's an actual public street. But then all of the interior movements from Food City to the Hallmark shop to, to Jimmy John's, those are not public streets. And so it's internal movements between multiple users. So they've created this. It does have a different feel because it's not coming into you at the creation where we can say, well, can you turn that building this direction, or can you make that an actual public street that would move from Park Street out to Dedmore. And again, we'll be coming back to you with additional language in the future to really talk about how we can address some of that. Because we've had other developments lately that have come to us and want to do what they're considering internal private streets and asking for things like 12-foot wide pavement and those things, which we're not in favor of when it comes to a new development. So it is internal parking movement, and in general, we would not ask for this type of easement, just like we didn't ask Food City for that when they were doing a cohesive development. But because we have all these multiple owners and a pre-existing condition, that's why we're proposing it that way.
Thank you.
Anything else for me, or? Okay, you get the hot seat.
All right. Hello again. Nathan Berg, 2433 Walton Road, for the record, Abingdon, Virginia. So, kind of stepping away and looking at this big picture and kind of why am I here? I'm not actually officially one of the property owners yet. Currently, we have the Ice House under contract, and as Cam is very well aware of that building, he's never been there. It's a neat old building that has a lot of potential, but one of the main problems with that building is that there's no Main Street visibility. There's really no way to get to it directly from Main Street. So unless you know it's there, you're not really going to be drawn to that place. Additionally, the new owners of Sweetberry Brewing were running into somewhat the same problem, where there's no Main Street visibility of that business either. And so we were kind of looking at the Ice House on whether what we might want to do with that, and then looking at, okay, we have a brewery, we have a coffee shop, and a place where they're roasting the coffee beans, and all of those things kind of have a natural synergy with something like a bike shop. And we have been for a while looking at people that might want to bring a bike shop to Abingdon and an outdoors store, because since the ski house closed down, unfortunately, that's left a void in Abingdon, and Abingdon is kind of this great, outdoorsy small town that really would benefit from a store like that. The Ice House was really the natural fit for that, but really the only way to make that work as a retail space would be to have visibility from Main Street. And then you combine with that kind of the synergy that bike shops and outdoor retail have. I mean, if you go to, there's a lot of other places, if you go to other towns where you have a brewery and a outdoor retail establishment or a bike shop, and those things kind of work really well together. Combined with that, then a coffee shop and a coffee roasting, and then some other neat things that might be able to occur in the Ice House building. It just seemed like a natural fit to try to kind of pull all this together. So I came to Mayanna and said, hey, I've got a crazy idea, and at this point she's used to me coming at her with crazy ideas, and so we kind of worked together to figure out how can we actually make this happen. And this is ultimately what we came up with. And really it's a way to, all of these businesses are great on their own, right? I mean, Girl on the Raven, Sweetberry Brewing, And even if we were able to bring in a bike shop, all those things are great on their own. But you kind of pull them together and market them as one cohesive center, then it becomes really special. And that's what we're trying to achieve with this, is this one cohesive thing that people are able to come to, and you come, and it becomes more of a gathering place. So that's the big idea behind all this. Obviously, there's challenges. Anytime you're taking existing property and these historic buildings and we're trying to make it all work, it requires some flexibility. So, for example, like the 12-foot wide drives instead of 15 feet. Well, what we're trying to do is use the existing entrances without encroaching too much on these other historic properties, and so we're asking that to be reduced in size somewhat to basically one lane, so 12 feet. That's a standard size for a one lane drive, and so there's no perfect way to do it, but I think this is a pretty good option to make this dream kind of become a reality.
Well, who will maintain that road? Like, say, snow, say a tree falls or something like that.
Right.
Is everybody going to be bucking on who's going to move this? Is
All
it
of that,
the town or?
Right, all of that would be spelled out basically in the language of that easement. And so that then becomes a little bit of a negotiation between all the different members of the property owners that are involved. And so that's one of the contingencies, that this would not be approved without all of that being spelled out.
Gotcha.
Well, I don't know about you all, but when I look at it, I've been on Deadmore before trying to get out of the Girl and the Raven, and it's a bear. So I could see myself using this easement to get out on the Park Street and perhaps go down to the red light at the con.
Right.
I think it's, in some ways, it could mitigate some of that left turn traffic from Deadmore onto Main Street. So
It's difficult.
I mean, I think if it's done the right way, and it appears as though you guys have done your research and worked well with Diana on it, but I think it could perhaps ease some of those traffic issues.
Right, that would be our hope, because you're really creating more points for people to. You actually don't have that many new. There's no new places for people to come in. I mean, for people to leave. You're actually kind of you're taking the existing entrances and then making those available to more of the businesses in there, and that kind of spreads the traffic out.
And you aren't concerned about increased traffic on Park Street?
It will increase traffic, I think,
Yes.
on Park Street, most
Because-
definitely.
yes.
It's going to increase traffic on Park Street, just like.
Yes, like
Yeah.
Mr.
Oh,
Austin
it
said.
will to some degree. There's
Yeah,
no
I think
question.
it would
Yeah.
to some degree. Yeah. I think for those businesses on Park Street, that would be a good thing.
I worry somewhat about the residential area on Park Street, because I do hear from residents on Park Street that people drive, and I walk there sometimes at night, and people do come flying through there. And I wonder.
There is the park there too.
Yeah, so I wonder if we may need to think about signage or other speed control measures on Park Street in conjunction with this plan, to protect the kids at the park and to protect the residents of Park Street.
The only thing that I see is I'm kind of with you on that, Mayor, but I just see more congestion on Park Street. And you
But we
said
will have
business-
sidewalks the whole way soon
Yeah.
also, so that should help with that as well.
Yeah, but, I mean, it's gonna create, for people who live on Park Street, people who live on Kings Mountain where I live at, I mean, this is great, but it's gonna create shortcuts. There's no way that you can tell me that somebody's gonna say, hey, I think I can cut this way.
It's true.
It's gonna cause for more
I
chaos and more shortcuts.
You
as well,
definitely
too.
want signage that indicated that no through traffic is allowed.
Yeah, I don't think those are necessarily things that would preclude it. I just think they're things that we need to consider.
Yes.
Having spent 14 years there trying to convince people not to park where they're not supposed to park, keeping people out of the middle of that, I'll be shocked.
Out of the middle of where?
The easement itself.
The easement itself on either property on Denmore or Park Street, people not just parking right in the middle where they want to park, but
Right.
I
Well-
understand there'll be signage there, but good luck to you.
Yeah, there will be some marked parking places. as
Are you
well.
thinking surface-wise, or are you thinking asphalt or cement?
Part
or-
of it would be asphalt, and then the main square, kind of where the brewery parking currently is, that would remain gravel.
Okay. I was just thinking what Cam's saying, maybe if that were outlined in a pavement or a cement or something, that would prevent people from trying to park across the easement. and-
We also had discussed using planters, where basically you have a big galvanized steel planter, so to kind of corral people into the direction that they need to go.
Makes sense.
Right.
I think for the brewery, obviously, it offers a lot of benefit. Right now, you kind of have this chain link fence, which isn't aesthetically very pleasing, and then you're able to then have basically a memorandum of understanding where there's some shared parking there as well. For a bike shop, typically they're not open during the same hours as a brewery, so they complement each other.
Do we have any further questions?
But this has already gone to the planning commission and they voted yes, right?
And I have to say, I listened to all of the suggestions the planning commission had, and I'd like to say that, like I always say when people come to me to ask questions about the planning commission, is they do such a good job.
They're thoughtful, and I think everything that
They do their homework.
that they mentioned was well thought out and very well received.
They know what they're talking about.
They do.
Okay,
All
if
right,
there are no
thank
more
you.
questions, then I will close the public hearing. Now, our third public hearing is for a proposed zoning text amendment. We're gonna have Mayana come forward once again, but it's for, Chapter 44, Article 6, special limitations for specific uses.
Hello again. Virginia's law has continued to shift, and we had additional information provided to us in July that really spoke to the weed, hemp, CBD, Delta-8, marijuana, cannabis, and vape-type shops. And so with that, I will say for the record that currently we have not specifically permitted a cannabis shop. So we understand that while as an individual you may grow and you may share and you may utilize products, there is no commercial outlet for cannabis at this time. However, we've had a variety of stores that have come through and gotten permits for other things. Hydroponic stores, herbal remedy stores, gift stores, and so we do have quite a few of these different types of shops that have entered into our community. So in discussing that process, obviously, we will always say that you cannot out-zone something that is illegal. If somebody's doing an illegal business within their shop, they could be selling teddy bears. If they're producing something that's illegal, that can't be fixed with zoning. What zoning does do, though, is it allows you to take a look at specific uses and identify where uses can be located. That's pretty much the primary reason for zoning. Historically, zoning was dealt with tenement housing and separating agriculture and industrial uses from other uses. So from that perspective, in discussing some of the concerns regarding the shops that we are currently seeing in our community, a couple of very specific things came to the surface. One was that we had concerns that the historic district could have this type of a shop be requested to be in there. The other concern that we had was the entrance corridor, which is the overlay of the entrance corridor and the historic district. And third, and probably most primarily, also the distance to and from public and private schools. So in doing our research, we identified that what we are really looking at is recreation substances from a retail standpoint. So that's vape shops, that is any type of legal product that is being sold that takes up 75% or greater of sales, or 25% of sales. So I want to be very specific and on the record that nothing about this is proposed to apply to grocery stores, gas stations, pharmacies, or any of that nature where 75% or greater of those products are being sold that are not, any type of recreational substance. So this is really focused on those shops that are focused on tobacco, cigarettes, cigars, smokeless tobacco, pipe tobacco, also non-combustible products like nicotine, vaping fluids, and those types of things. So when you look at zoning, one of the key things that you look at is making sure that if you have a use that you want to keep out of certain districts, that you make sure that you do have a district that they can go into. So what we're proposing here is that while we may not have them allowed in the old and historic or the entrance corridor, that yes, by right, they can go in our M1 district. So that's our more industrial district. Through a special use permit, like you heard tonight for these two sign things, they would also be allowed in the B2. So what that allows you all to do, and the Planning Commission and staff, is to take in an application, take a look at their signage, take a look at the colors, take a look at the things that a special use permit does do, and require it to go through some design process. So it doesn't say that this is eliminated. If in the future there was additional, state regulations that did allow the retail sale, again, it would be in this similar manner. You would have to go through design criteria. You'd come through a special use permit if you wanted it in the general business district. If you wanted to do it by right, you could do it in the M1 district. What we also are hoping to do with this is have a description that says it must be located at least 2,000 lineal feet from the property line of any public or private school. And again, we have several in the community. It also needs to be at least 2,000 feet from an existing recreational substance store. So it allows you to spread them throughout the community and not have them all confined unto one area. It keeps them in the B2 zoning district. It keeps them out of the old and historic district. And so it really is looking at it from a holistic perspective that says, even if there wasn't cannabis being traded or shared, we are actually just looking at all adult substances. So most of you have probably been in other communities where vape shops are very loud and bright and colorful, and they're really trying to attract you in. So it is also looking at that. The pieces that we put in that are prohibited, no commercial retail sales of any substance containing marijuana, or any of the synthetic versions of marijuana. No adult sharing in a commercial retail space of any substance containing marijuana or the synthetic versions of that. That directly mimics the state's requirements. We are not becoming more strict or less strict in that. We are just mimicking the state's requirements. The other piece where we are mimicking the state's requirement is no person shall advertise in or send any advertising material into the Commonwealth regarding marijuana, marijuana products, or any substance containing a synthetic version of marijuana, other than those that may be legally sold in the Commonwealth under the subtitle or Article 4.2 of the Drug Control Act. Advertisements regarding marijuana, marijuana products, or any substances containing a synthetic derivative shall comply with the provisions of this subtitle. And so basically what is that? So if you had a shop and you named it something, like we have a hydroponic store, we have an herbal store, that's not what is being restricted here. What's being restricted is having flags with a marijuana leaf on it, having marijuana signs in your window, even having it says any advertising material into the Commonwealth, so it restricts people from putting flyers on cars. It really limits how you can advertise, and it also is helpful when we're talking about signage, because we've had several planning commission signs that have come through that have had a variety of different marijuana leaves, et cetera, on them. And the final thing that this is looking at doing is linking this to the business license. So currently, a business license is required for any business operating within the town. The way that your business license can get revoked is if you have a moral or a legal situation in which you have gone through the entire legal process and you have proven that there is a concern. And Cam can make that much more legal. I'm trying to be very, very low-key here, but what we're asking for in this is that, this just says that we can revoke, the town of Abingdon can revoke a business license if it's found to be in conflict with the allowance of legally sold products in the Commonwealth. So we're trying to take our code, match it to the state's code, but actually put something on the books. And a couple of the questions that we received were if the farmer's market, for example, if they have a member of the farmer's market that's selling a CBD oil or a lotion that contains it, etc. Again, the Commonwealth has described and defined the limitations on that. We are not going to have a zoning person go through the farmer's market booths and identify that. If somebody is performing another service, like at a salon where they have a CBD oil-based shampoo, again, that type of usage is completely allowed. This is specifically for the shops that we have identified that are selling this. So we had a little question and discussion, at the planning commission level, and there was some concern about, well, are we restricting one use and not another? And I will say that this is zoning. This is really what zoning does. It just says if there's a use that may come in conflict with other things, like school children, that we allow a use but don't allow it to infringe on other property owner rights. And so with that, we also added some definitions. We added the definition of what adult sharing of marijuana is. Specifically, adult sharing does not include instances in which marijuana is given away contemporaneously with another reciprocal transaction. It is not a gift of marijuana that is offered or advertised in conjunction with an offer for sale of goods or services. It is not a gift of marijuana. A gift of marijuana is contingent upon a separate reciprocal transaction for goods and services. So we were very specific in that. We defined what marijuana was, and we defined what recreational substance retail, on-site use and off-site use. So staff findings, whenever we do a zone text amendment, we have to make sure that we have findings for why we're doing that. For instance, in this case, we look at the comprehensive plan, which is adopted in 2020, so it's fairly recent. And the items that we are referencing are quality of life and the economy. So Abingdon will achieve well-planned, orderly growth by building on our assets, increasing walkability, and maintaining an exceptionally high quality of life. Abingdon will grow its economy by helping a wide range of local and regional entrepreneurs and businesses prosper. The town's standards for preservation will maintain the look and feel of its historic districts while allowing for economically viable reuse of structures. Abingdon will have a thriving tourism economy built upon three main pillars: the arts, history, and outdoor recreation. The town will have a wide variety of options such as lodging, restaurants, experiences, retail, tours, culinary events to meet the needs of visitors of all ages and interests. And Abingdon will invest in activities, amenities, and experience to meet the changing needs for repeat and new travelers. So we felt that allowing these types of recreational substance to be in specific locations supports what the comprehensive plan is saying. Whether the proposed amendment is in conflict with any provisions of the zoning ordinance. We do not think it's in conflict. There will continue to be allowed locations for the facilities by right. It's not limiting grocery stores, gas stations, other similar uses. And if they do want to be in the B2 district, they will come through a public hearing. Whether and the extent to which there are changed conditions that require this amendment. And so we would say, yes, there are changed conditions. We are at the border of, North Carolina, Tennessee, Kentucky, West Virginia. We are a border town, and we have seen quite a few shops that are popping up that are primarily sharing these substances. Whether the extent to which the proposed amendment addresses a demonstrated community need. And again, as there have been more shops that are selling recreational substance, in order to protect the entrance corridor, the old historic district, and the children in our community, we need to limit those businesses. Whether and the extent to which the proposed amendment will result in a logical and orderly development pattern, the N1 district continues to allow it by right, and B2 is a special use permit. Whether the extent to which the proposed amendment will result in significantly adverse effects on the natural environment. This does not specifically have anything to do with adverse impacts on the natural environment. And then whether the proposed amendment will have a positive effect on the balance between residential and non-residential uses. And again, just like all uses, we think that this does separate them. So it keeps these in the M1 and the B2 and separated from the residential districts as it stands. So with that, we also contacted every one of our current businesses that are doing some level of an adult substance product at their businesses and gave them this information. We also had a public hearing at the Planning Commission level, and we did post everything and notice it appropriately. So with that, I can answer any questions you all might have, or if there's any questions from the public.
Are there any questions from the public? Are there any questions from the council? I'd once again like to comment that this appears to have taken an awful lot of work and research and effort, and I'd like to applaud both the Planning Commission and town staff for their extensive research and work.
There's been quite a bit of misunderstanding and confusion and wishful thinking about what the law is in this kind of vacuum that we're in. And God love the market economy. The market has responded in a complete way in Abingdon, and it kind of got ahead of everybody. We looked around, as we always do, at other locations and based one of ours on Chesterfield County was, I think, the first one to sort of really wade into the mix. But I think everybody thought that the legislature was going to say what was legal and what wasn't legal, and since they haven't taken that extra step for retail sales to be legal, then there are lots of sort of sleight of hand and urban legends about what the law is that isn't true. And so I think we did our best to try to balance all of those factors. And of course the existing businesses won't be affected, but it would just be the ones who apply after this is passed, if it's passed, in a more orderly fashion. And just kind of went off the kind of Wild West in this vacuum of something that nobody had ever thought would have to be zoned before. And so that's how we got to here.
And we did end up, I mean, there have been several businesses that we've actually denied their business license. So we did have at least two dispensaries that came in and either told us that they wanted to be a dispensary or had provided us enough information and background that we knew that they were not indicating on their business license what they were truly wanting to do. And so we have denied those. And again, this basically puts it into a zoning path forwards, which means, the zoning ordinance has a compliance section, so it does allow us to do compliance. So it does allow our compliance department to work with the Town of Abingdon's Police Department, and so we can actually create a way in which to move forward that is related to zoning and not just in a complete illegal manner. So this does give it an additional foothold.
Are there any other questions for Mayana from the council or from the public? If not, then I will close this public hearing. So now we will move forward to resolutions. And the first resolution to consider is a resolution approving the proposal for the 2 comprehensive sign programs that we discussed previously. So do I have a motion for the resolution?
Mayor, I'd like to separate those two if we could for purposes of our consideration.
Certainly. So let's first consider the comprehensive sign program located at 238 West Main Street, otherwise known as Abingdon Commons.
I'd make a motion to adopt that resolution.
Second that.
It's subject to the extra planning commission requirements.
Correct, subject to any additional planning commission requirements that would come up.
I second that motion.
Okay, so we have a resolution to approve this comprehensive sign program subject to conditions that will be set forth by the Planning Commission located at 238 West Main Street. The motion was made by Mr. Webb and it was seconded by Mr. Austin. Is there any discussion? If there's no discussion, Kim, would you please call the roll?
Mr. Austin.
Aye.
Ms. Quetch.
Aye.
Mr. Webb.
Aye.
Vice Mayor Anderson.
Aye.
And Mayor Pillion.
Aye. Now, the second resolution to be considered is the one located at 370 East Main Street, to be known in the future as East Village. Do we have a motion to approve this sign plan?
I just wanted to clarify that the conditions that were identified here still had the 15-foot easement. So, you know, your applicant did ask for that to be changed to 12 for his application. And if you do want and have any other interest in talking to the fire department, he is willing to speak. Just to clarification.
Did the planning commission approve the 12 also, or did that come afterwards?
The planning commission went with the 15. Yeah, so it did come after. At the time, there actually was a little more of a sketch and not quite the full diagram that he provided tonight, so you did see new information.
I think the signage is just beautiful, and I like the idea of the sign clutter that you talked about and removing that. I like the idea of the internal movement that you discussed. I just think all of those are positives, and the use of the buildings, particularly the old ice house and the suggestions regarding that. And I'm so much in favor of that, but I am so concerned about Park Street residents and the additional traffic going right by a park where the children are going to be. And I think you can put up oodles of signs and you're still going to have people drive the manner that they want to drive through there. And as I said a moment ago, I don't care whether we call it an easement or a road, they're going to make it a thoroughfare. And when they make it a thoroughfare, they're going to be on an easement that does not meet state specifications. And we know it doesn't meet state specifications. And yet we're going to funnel vehicle traffic onto an easement that does not meet those specifications. And we know we're doing that if we pass this resolution. But aside from that, everything else, I'm very much in favor of.
Well, and I don't want to, go too far, and, I mean, if they will allow you to respond after I say this, but, there are a couple things that you could do some additional conditions. So, I mean, one of the things would be to require them to have something other than a gravel surface through the brewery parking lot. The other thing that you could require is we have required a parking plan, but no one indicated that they would need to have, actual like parking stop, any kind of a parking stop bar. So again, if you felt like you needed to add additional conditions, you could discuss that and add some, if it was keeping you from getting to an approval. But again, I would suggest if you do that ask the applicant what they would think about that.
So if that's how we want to handle it, then do we push this to our next meeting? Do we push it back to the planning commission? How do we proceed?
Yeah, I don't know if, I guess we could workshop it here, but.
Can I speak? So, time is of the essence. We currently have an option to purchase this property, and that option expires in about a week. And so, if we have to wait an additional month, this project may not move forward. Just to address the concern of this becoming a thoroughfare, what I would like, the question I would like to beg is, what, if you kind of look at a map of the area, what is the benefit of someone using that as a throughway? Well, maybe you could get to Deadmore, but last I checked, people aren't beating down the doors to get to Deadmore.
I live on that side of town.
Right, and I think
People I just know that it will create a shortcut and it will create problems. I just think so.
Right.
With the playground being there and.
I think let's say back when that was Wolfville Brewery, I think that there was a whole lot more traffic coming through Park Street for people to get to a concert there. Whereas now what we're actually doing is allowing people from Main Street to be able to come directly from Main Street to get to the brewery, which actually reduces the potential traffic that you would get from Park Street. I think overall, in a lot of ways, this would remediate some of that traffic. I think Park Street is a mixed-use area. I mean, if you look at the zoning, if you look at the use of that, it is mixed use. So we are going to have to balance the demands of residents plus people that have businesses there. You have Holston Mountain Artisans. I'm sure they would love additional traffic on Park Street being driven to their business. There will be a hotel on Park Street. That is something that would benefit from additional traffic. So there's a balance there. I think there's a balance to be had. I don't think that there's a strong argument saying that that suddenly, it would become a traffic jam there. I just don't see that as being necessarily a problem. The fire chief didn't seem to think that it would be something that would impact the fire services. So again, I think it's a balance, and I'm willing to look at some additional conditions. But if we keep piling, we've already put a few conditions on this project. If we keep piling them on, this might be something that would be dead in the water, and Abingdon is left with another vacant building that is very quickly deteriorating.
So I have a question, and you may not need to answer it. Chief Holbrook may have to answer it. I don't know. So when Mr. Alston talked about the fact that they would be roads that were narrower than state standards, and I understand that they would not be public roads, they would be in fact easements. What happens if there's an accident on a road of that sort? Does that accident, is that something that's adjudicated by the town? Or is it something that is considered private property? And how does that impact the business owners? Sorry to put you in the hot seat. Sorry. I just thought that it was something that his comment made me think about.
Sure, so this would be considered a private property crash, in which we deal with those, we do an incident report so that information is exchanged and we make sure the right information is exchanged. If it was DUI, we could take enforcement action. And that reckless driving, if it's severely reckless, we could take some kind of enforcement, just the same as we could do on any public parking lot.
Okay.
So I would look at this as more of a public parking lot style drive around. Much to say, like you mentioned earlier, Mayanna mentioned like Food City,
right,
or the old Food City area through there where you had Town Center Drive that went around to the old Kmart building. If a crash occurred there, then we would treat it as the same as it happened on a parking lot.
Okay,
Does that
thank
kinda
you.
answer?
It does, thank you. So my next question is, what would we change, and this is for my fellow council members, what would we change to make this a more palatable proposition?
So, This kind of ties in with what you're saying, but I would like to ask the other chief a question. You know, and I'm not trying to put Cam in a bad place or anything, but in previous traffic situations, I mean, how cumbersome was the traffic coming out of there? I mean, was it ever a real problem? I mean, do we think we're going to dump 100,000 cars onto Park Street? I know nobody can say for sure, but.
Hope it's not 100,000. I've been on Park Street for 30 years. That's how long the fire station's been there. I've seen it from when it was the fuel, or whoever owned the fuel, Chevron had the fuel station there, to the several different iterations of the brewery, to having a fence, not having a fence, to having a gate. I've seen all those iterations. I have not seen that many people use it as a main travel thoroughfare, except maybe for a few firefighters that were maybe up on Trick Street somewhere, and we use it as a cut through until they put the fence up. The only time we have ever had a traffic issue that I'm aware of is when they had the concert at the brewery and the police department and the sheriff's office had to come in and break up that one concert. That is the only time that I'm aware of we've ever had any issues there on Park Street.
I don't remember that either.
Yeah.
Well, one thing I want to say to the former bit, where Cam was previously there before, why did you put that gate up? Did you put that gate up to stop people from coming through there?
Well,
or what was the purpose of that gate on your end of the stick?
There are a few differences in what's proposed now, and the primary one is access to Main Street, which I think is the benefit to what they're saying. So that does not exist now. You can't get from Main Street to it. You can only get from Park Street or from Dedmore. And there is a gate, and currently is a gate, in between 143 Dedmore and 125 Dedmore that is typically closed all day long and only open when the brewery is open. In addition to that, in more recent times, the owner of 350 Park Street, the Ice House, put the fence in between those two properties. So that was that when Questenberry's owned it, it was all shut off on both sides. And then when Wolfhills Brewing Company operated out of the Ice House and had the parking lot next door, there wasn't a fence there, but typically the fence from Dedmore was closed when it wasn't open. So it wasn't, normally 9 to 5, it wasn't a through, it couldn't be a throughfare because the other one gate was closed, and then in later times, both gates were closed, and that's more like it was in Questenberry. So it's hard to say, based on history, what it would be now, because all these three different ways would be open, and they really never have been during normal business times, in my experience.
Because I like the idea of bringing the businesses together, and I like the idea of managing the traffic flow. But I also understand the concerns, and so that is why, I mean, would making it a 15-foot easement make it more palatable? Would thinking about traffic control on Park Street make it more palatable? What would we need to do to make this a resolution that we would possibly approve?
Nate, can you speak on behalf of the 15 feet? I mean, is that feasible? Is that something that we can require?
That's feasible. There's some existing pavement, and that pavement is 12 feet.
Mm-hmm.
And again, it kind of fits in with the scale of the, especially if you look at the entrance from Main Street,
Mm-hmm.
a one-way entrance. Could we make that a 15-foot wide easement? I mean, that's probably possible. That I don't see how that provides a huge amount of benefit. I think you got to look at what's the purpose of this. And so if this is a one-lane road and 12 feet is what you can get a fire truck on a 12-foot wide. That's kind of for me, I'm thinking through this. What's the point of it? If you can get a fire truck on it, then I think then it serves its purpose. There won't be deliveries coming on that 12-foot section. So, sure, we can make it 15 feet. That increases the burden to the rest of the people. That it took a lot of wrangling to get everybody on board and to accept this. It takes a lot of collaboration. So adding one more condition, I'm afraid that's going to push this over the edge to where it's just not something that I can convince everybody of.
And why did the Planning Commission request it be 15 feet?
So As far as road standards, that's the only road standard we have. So we basically took our smallest available road right away, which is
Okay.
for an alley.
Okay.
So it could be 12 feet. Now, one of the things that staff didn't recommend, after we had talked with the applicant, is we didn't recommend that additional access point between AMT and the brewery, so that could still keep the gate up on that side. Planning Commission recommended that additional access point. So if you didn't have it over there, then if you did come in from Park Street, you'd kind of circle around and have to go back out Park Street, because you'd realize pretty quick you couldn't pass through. At least not unless the brewery is open.
I would think that that additional easement would allow, that might actually cut down on Park Street traffic, would divide the traffic between Park and Dedmore.
Right.
I think it made great sense, like,
Yeah.
and we just, yeah.
And I mean, you still would be able to get out of those parcels the normal way, like, or the current way. Like Girl and the Raven, you're still gonna be able to come out onto Dedmore. or
Yeah,
out
oh yeah,
on the-
yeah.
you know.
In terms of Girl and the Raven, nothing will change in terms of where you're coming in or coming out of the Girl and the Raven place. As far as the brewery, you are keeping the main entrance is off of Dedmore for the entrance and exit is off of Dedmore. So now you're actually creating more paths of egress for the brewery. You're also creating one more path of ingress for the brewery as well. I think, in terms of looking at this from a public safety perspective, if you have an event at the brewery and, I think it's a safer option to have more paths of egress than just having the one. Not that, that's in the small likelihood that that's needed. I think though, the goal is to look at, I think you have competing interests here. You have the valid concern of, okay, how's this affecting people that live here, currently live here? And then you also have how is this affecting businesses and people and businesses that may benefit from this, and the public at large that may benefit from this. And I think that looking at it from a perspective of good planning is that, let's look at Park Street. Is Park Street a solely residential neighborhood? No, it's not. It's mixed use. It has, for a while, it was partly manufacturing. There was a jail there for a while. Now that's becoming a hotel. So you're looking at a mixed use neighborhood, and I think your entire approach to how you manage traffic for a mixed use neighborhood is fundamentally different than if it were a closed only residential area. And so I think that's how you kind of balance it out, is look at what the underlying zoning is. I think this fits in very well with the comprehensive plan. The comprehensive plan designated that Park Street area as being mixed use. It fits in line with that as well. Is it perfect? No, because we're trying to stitch together existing historic buildings. So it's not going to be perfect, but I think that this is a pretty good viable solution.
What are some solutions, some things that we could do to address the traffic on Park and Dedmore? I mean, are there things that could be done to make sure that the park is safe, or to make sure that people don't go flying down Park Street, or clog up Dedmore Street? Are there things we could do to alleviate that concern?
This came up, I guess, on Plum Alley and the Methodist Church and their sort of VDOT standards about where those things can go, and they can't go as many places as you would think that they could go.
What things?
Speed bumps.
Speed bumps. Yeah, speed bumps and things.
Yeah.
But I mean, I'm just trying to think creatively and try to think about this from all angles, and prompt us to try to brainstorm about it a little bit. But are there other traffic calming measures that we could take? Are there other things we could do?
The difficulty of tying all these things together is the benefit of Main Street is the sign and the access from Main Street. So if you said just come in Park Street, then everybody doesn't have the sign. But if you closed off Park Street, then you just have sort of circle and come back out one of the other ways. So it's
I guess I'm
tough
just
to
kind
figure out what
of
everybody wants.
taking
to
the
do.
common sense approach. I mean, if you're let's look at how many cars are on Main Street versus Park Street. And a good indicator of kind of what the common sense approach might be is we couldn't get anybody interested in leasing that space when they're just relying on traffic from Park Street. Once you open that up to Main Street, then we have people that are interested in leasing that space. And what that tells me is that the traffic is on Main Street. They're going to be coming in from Main Street. And honestly, I don't know.
They'll probably be turning right beside the park.
Right, I don't know
back out to
what
Main
benefit,
Street for the
right,
most
what
part.
benefit they would have from coming then back onto Park Street. The natural flow of traffic is to leave back out onto Deadmore and then get back out onto Main Street again.
Okay.
So again, that's kind of, I'm just trying to look at this logically. Is that, can I make promises and say, no, this won't affect any traffic on Park Street? No, I'm not going to promise that. But I think looking at it, taking a common sense approach, I don't see why there would be a tremendous influx of traffic on Park Street.
Sure.
When basically you're looking at an entrance from Main Street and an exit back out onto Deadmore and then Main Street.
Okay. And I suppose if there were traffic concerns with the park, then maybe we could put a fence around that part of the park. Or there are other things that we could do if it becomes a problem. I mean, is that a consideration?
On our property, I guess the issue is since, if this is approved the way it's approved, that's all internal and just agreements on private property, and so we can't take it back.
I'm talking about, if we become concerned about traffic in the park, then maybe we could put a small fence up that would keep children from the road. Or there may be creative ways to think about this. So
I thought you were saying put one on Park Street, but I
no,
see what you're saying.
no, around the park. Yes. So I'm just trying to think about it from all different angles. So that might make people feel safer if their kids are playing in the park, right?
Right.
Okay. So the way I understand this, and our attorney will have to tell me if I am incorrect in handling this according to procedure, but we can do three things. We can approve the resolution, we cannot approve the resolution, or we can approve it with certain conditions,
Or you can table it.
or we can table it. So I will turn this over to council, and I will accept motions for approving it as is, approving it with certain conditions as designated by the planning commission, or tabling it to workshop it more.
Well, I would be willing to make a motion to approve it with the restrictions that the planning commission, I always go back to the planning commission or the experts. If they're okay with it, I'm okay with it. That's why we put those people on those committees. So if they said they want 15 feet and the property owners are willing to do that, then I would make that motion.
Okay. So we have a motion on the floor. Do we have a second for that motion? Okay, do we have any other motions?
Well, that motion dies for lack of a second.
That motion dies for lack of a second. Do we have any other motions? I can
I make a motion, we table it
Okay.
for additional consideration, because again, I don't want to repeat what I said before, but I really like the things that they're doing. It's very positive, positive for the town. The implications of that to other property owners there is a great concern of mine. And if there is some viable alternative, I'd certainly be willing to listen to it. So I'd make a motion that we table it.
I'll second that motion that we table it.
Okay, so we have a motion to table the resolution for further workshopping from Mr. Austin. We have a second from Vice Mayor Anderson. Is there any discussion?
The 21st meeting.
Till the next meeting.
Is that what you-
Mr. Austin?
Yes.
Is there any discussion? If there's no discussion, Kim, would you please call the roll?
Mr. Austin?
Aye.
Mrs. Quetch? Aye. Mr. Webb?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Anderson?
Aye.
And Mayor Pili?
Aye. Okay, now we will discuss the resolution supporting the application for transportation alternative funds for the Park Street Improvements Phase 2 project. And we have Mr. Surratt, the Director of Public Works.
Mayor, council members, thank you. Come before you, it is VDOT application season for us, and I'm just here to ask you to support they need a letter of support, a resolution of support from the town of Abingdon to put in a transportation alternative application for the Park Street Phase 2, because as you all know, the existing Park Street award for the urban programs is no longer a thing, so we had to condense the scope and to get this thing constructed. So we moved the rest of it, of the design plans for the rest of the Park Street project into a Phase 2 and are planning on putting it into a transportation alternatives program to get it funded. So we just need you guys to approve a resolution of support.
Okay, do we have a motion for a resolution of support?
I'll make that motion.
Do we have a second?
I'll second that.
So we have a motion on the floor by Ms. Quetch, seconded by Mr. Webb. Do we have any discussion? If there's no discussion, can you please call the roll?
Mr. Austin.
Aye.
Ms. Quetch.
Aye.
Mr. Webb.
Aye.
Vice Mayor Anderson.
Aye.
And Mayor Pillion.
Aye. Next, we have a resolution supporting the application for Highway Safety Improvement Program funds for safety initiative projects. Once more, Michael Stratt.
Yes, ma'am. Again, it's another resolution support, so we can put in the application for our safety improvements through the VDOT programs for highway safety improvements, for either some crosswalks, road diet, and those kind of projects that we're going to put into the application to get funded through VDOT.
Okay, do we have a motion for this resolution of support?
So moved.
I'll second.
So we have a motion by Mr. Webb, second by Mr. Anderson. Is there any discussion? If there's no discussion, can we please call the roll?
Mr. Austin.
Aye.
Ms. Quetch.
Aye.
Mr. Webb.
Aye.
Vice Mayor Anderson.
Aye.
And Mayor Pillion.
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Now we have a first reading of ordinances, consideration of proposed zoning test amendment to Chapter 44, Article 6, Section 6-1-1 through 6-1-5. Mount Arise, do we need to read all of this again? So this is the
This is just the first reading, so.
the first reading of the ordinance previously discussed concerning recreational substances.
So you can just, unless somebody wants to waive the second reading, which I don't think you do, is, shall the motion be?
Shall the motion be rejected? So then that just goes to a second reading.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, we have a second reading of ordinances, a consideration of a proposed amendment to the Town of Abingdon Code of Ordinances, Chapter 58, Solid Waste. Again, Mayana, once again. Busy lady.
Yeah, that's why you all got a canceled meeting last time. 'Cause I didn't have gave you a break before I put all this to you. We came to you last month, and we have been working on the solid waste ordinance for the town of Abingdon, a separate process from the actual raising of the rate. So this was not part of that. This is its own process, and. So from the discussion last time, from public comment, from talking to several property owners, we are coming back with basically the same bit of information for you, except there are a couple changes. So continue to ensure that we have added language that says waste containers are now owned by the purchasers. So as a homeowner or property owner, you will own your own waste containers. If they are damaged, if the town of Abingdon damages it, it is the responsibility of the town to replace the can or fix it. For commercial services, we have established in here in the table that there are really specific thresholds that are met for a business to actually be required to have a commercial dumpster. So that was one of the big things. Before, it was just really not clear. If you're an existing business and you have multiple cans, you're grandfathered in. We're not taking away that. You don't have to convert your service to a dumpster. The brush and bulky trash fee There's 2 key services that the town of Abingdon provides weekly, and that was part of the start of this conversation. These services are part of your solid waste fee if you are paying that. It is not part of, we've been basically doing it for free for a lot of properties. So we're looking at the ordinance establishing that solid waste fee for commercial establishments, but then we are also in a process of establishing which commercial establishments would actually end up needing to pay that. And the part that we removed is the reference to the biannual fee. So even though it would be the same amount of money collected twice a year, instead, there seemed to be quite a bit of opposition to that, so we simply removed that as an option. And I double checked with Tammy, because I know last time you all asked me where we'd gotten that from, and it had actually come from a Roanoke ordinance, so as your council indicated, we do look at other people's ordinances to come up, but that's been removed. So what you have before you for a second reading is the items that, per our discussion, you all seem to be in favor of, and then we did remove the items, as you can see on page 5. We struck through that in red, where there was a possibility of just doing it biannually. So I don't know if there's any additional questions.
This ordinance provides that the town manager or his designee is to set the rate for the collection. Is that correct?
Correct.
I listened intently to the gentleman who spoke to us earlier tonight, and he's left, I think, by now. But he was concerned about the increase, and I do not question for a minute that the increase was necessary. That's not the point of what I'm saying. But I'm a very strong believer that the town council is elected, and that any fee that is charged generally to the residents of the town of Abingdon should be within the town council and not within administration. Now, I know Mr. Cochran has paid me a lot to say this tonight and get it out of his bailiwick, but I really believe that. I think that we answer to the residents of the town, and I'm sure there are other fees out there that I'm not aware of tonight, but I think all of those should be within the town council's discretion. And I don't want to micromanage, and maybe I'm getting into that field to some extent, but I think the council should be responsible for that.
And we do bring, for example, with the zoning ordinance and with the building permit fees, that's another portion that we end up with a lot of fees from that. We did bring that, and I think it was right as you were coming on, but we did bring that 3 or 4 times, I think, and we had given you a full layout of how we compared all the different communities and how we came to that. So in general, we do try to bring the fees that are required to you, but again, I think you can say yes or no, but I think that, I mean, in general, any fees that you all would be interested, that's a part that can be worked administratively and figured out how we
I
need
spoke
to.
with Mr. Cochran about that, and he quite appropriately pointed out to me that at least indirectly we did do that when we approved a budget, because those things are included within the budget. And I appreciated him doing that, but I think it directly needs to come through the council.
And may I take this opportunity, and if you can let me know if this is appropriate or not, but there have been a lot of questions about the trash ordinance and about the increased fees. And there's been a lot of Facebook chatter, there's been a lot of person-to-person chatter. We had a public comment tonight. Would you mind, and I understand that there were very, very good reasons for the increase of the fees, and that ordinance is not a new ordinance, that it's been around for quite some time. Could you just take a minute to remark upon that and to explain that process so that it is on the record so people can refer to the meeting for that information?
And add to it if you'd like. So there's a couple of things. One, we did an analysis of how much it's actually costing, and found that, we're in a deficit. A second piece of that, you all just purchased a $350,000 trash truck this year, and a good portion of our fleet in that department continues to need to be replaced. So any additional fees, we're also not just looking at trying to fund the department, but also to create a sinking fund to further finance those vehicles. So, as we all know, when you look at financing, you can only take on so much debt service and still be in good favor as a town. And so as we look at our aging equipment, we also need to ensure that we have a way to finance that. So so financing the department, financing the equipment, and then again, just in general, looking at how long it had been and we had not done analysis for a very long time on that. And so looking at all of those things. We also brought to light the brush and bulky trash fees. So we frequently find that while we offer those services, we did not have a limitation on who could be offering those services. So we have found that more and more other private endeavors have been coming into the community and essentially, I know it sounds a bit strange and territorial, but essentially siphoning off customers. So while on the record, we have been able to establish that and require that other companies not participate in trash service in the town, we had not really enforced it to that measure. And so all of those things combined, wanting to offer the bulk and brush pickup to mobile home parks, to other commercial places that have those, that are currently having dumpsters, to financing our fleet and financing the program. It was kind of a triple or quadruple effect.
And is it also correct that the tipping fee was significantly increased by the county, and because of the closing of the landfill, we have to carry our trash a much greater distance, therefore raising our cost to dispose of our citizens' garbage?
Yes, so that was part, when I say funding the department, I just wasn't sure how far we wanted to go into it. But yes, for the record, we did have additional costs that were increased based on the tipping fees, based on the location. So for example, not a lot of people know this, but when we do brush pickup, and those, like, we take the brush and then the truck drives all the way to Blunttville to drop off the brush, and then drives all the way back and continues on the route. So that is another piece that, Mr. Cochran's very concerned about, ensuring that the town looks great and that brush is picked up, but the logistics of all of that are complex as well. So yes, fees had increased, and so the fees increasing, the distance we're driving,
and the age of the fleet relative to
age of the fleet, gas costs. I mean, it all, like, when we look at that full department, it's costing us a lot more to take trash.
And it's very important to me that our constituents understand that we did not raise that fee in order for the town to make money. We raised that fee in order to cover the town's costs so that the town did not go into debt in order to provide garbage services to our citizens. Instead, we just wanted to make sure that the garbage services, in other words, we're breaking even. We aren't making money on this situation. We're just covering our increased costs, which came about by no fault of our own.
Correct. And I mean, I think that you would say that with all of government and all of the fees, there's never a moment in which we are making money. We are always being very conscious and trying to break even.
Yeah, and just if I can add slightly to the, when we do the analysis as part of the whole budget process, one of the things we started looking at, and we're implementing some fleet analysis software so we can actually see where our costs are at. But some of our oldest vehicles are in public works, and these are the same ones that are driving all the way to Blunttville and back. It's just a matter of time till we have a way to fix them. Now, we use the ARPA money to buy, which is, I view it as like an inheritance almost. So we use the ARPA money to buy a very expensive garbage truck, the one-on garbage truck. But there's other pieces of equipment we have, vacuum trucks and all, they're very expensive vehicles. And so we want to make sure that we have a fleet fund that can support that.
Of course.
Rather than do what we've done in the past several years, which is, either finance it long-term. I mean, there's a limit to how much you want to do that. At some point, you just want to say, okay, well, and we're in the process right now of developing essentially like a comp plan, but for our fleet, so that we have the ability to replace those. But the public service stuff that is involved in waste disposal, those are all our most expensive vehicles, other than the big white ones that the fire chief is so proud of and takes beautiful care of. Thank you very much.
And then, I'm sorry, my very last question, and I'm not trying to hammer you, I just really want this to be a matter of public record, because there has been so much discussion about it. Also, how long has that ordinance been in place? A long time, right? It's not something we enacted this year.
It is definitely not something you've enacted this year. I was not prepared for that question, so.
Right, but 30 years.
Yeah.
Yes.
20 to 30 years.
Absolutely.
So we didn't just wake up and decide we're gonna create this new ordinance and require everybody in the town to pay for trash service. We're just enforcing an ordinance that has always been there.
Yes.
And treating every citizen the same.
You are correct. And
Okay.
yes, it does, the last time it was amended was in 1993, so it was probably even prior to that.
For the record, I'm no spring chicken, and that's the year I graduated from high school. So, to give it some perspective.
Yes, definitely, I mean, all of those things, yes. For all the chatter, those are the answers.
Thank you very much. I'm sorry to put you on the spot.
Oh, my goodness, no. No worries.
Thank you, Mayana, for everything you do for, thank you for answering the question.
Okay, so we need to approve the second reading of this ordinance. Do we have a motion to do this?
I make a motion, we approve the ordinance with the amendment to section 58-45 subsection A. It did previously provide that the fees were to be established by the town council. That was proposed to be changed, that it was to be the town manager or designee. My motion would be that it revert to the town council instead of the town manager or designee to set those rates future. And when I say that, and I make this clear, I'm not at all critical about the need for the increase. It was well-founded. Mr. Cochran does a good job, and I commend him for that. And I know that it was necessary to be done. But again, I just think if it's a fee that is paid by the majority of the residents of the town, it should be within the bailiwick of the town council to set those fees.
Okay, do we have a second for that motion?
I'll second that.
So there is a motion to accept this ordinance with amendments by Mr. Austin. It was seconded by Ms. Quetch. Is there any discussion? The only discussion I have is I would like to thank the town staff for their very thoughtful analysis and creative problem solving with this situation. Thank you. So if there's no more discussion, Kim, will you please call the roll?
Mr. Austin.
Aye.
Ms. Quetch.
Aye.
Mr. Webb.
Aye.
Vice Mayor Anderson.
Aye.
And Mayor Pillion.
Aye. So we have no consideration of bids on the agenda, nor do we have any new business or old business. So I will now turn it over to our town manager for business and communications from him.
Yes, the one point on the VDOT for exit 14, for exit 17, before the gentleman spoke about the exit 17 with the issues from Country Club Drive, I was personally going to compliment the DOT because that really came out well. It really, really did come out well, at least from the section of town that I commute through. They did a wonderful job. It's still not done, but I think the flow of traffic has really helped out quite a bit. I did check, and with respect to his comments, the design for Country Club Drive, that is the final design. So we communicate regularly with DOT, and we can ask them to take a look at this. I'm sure there's ways that they can tweak it if it's determined to be an issue. And the underside of the interstate, it is a contract through DOT, but that section for exit 17 has been under construction for longer than I've been here. So I think at some point, if it gets to the point where we need to pick it up, then that's something that we need to make happen. I mean, we're really trying to put our best foot forward every single day, but that has been under construction for quite some time. So I'm sure we'll take a look at that. And if DOT can make an adjustment, I'm sure that they will. They've been very accommodating on a lot of things that they do. And then one point on DOT, I know we just had that construction going on at Old Jonesboro where it came to Main Street, and there was concerns about the traffic flow there. And so I checked with DOT on that particular one, and the contractor, the DOT has a separate fund that pays for the state police to provide traffic control on that, because that wasn't a town project, that was one that DOT was managing. And so if the contractor had asked for state police assistance, they would have certainly got it. It just wasn't done in that particular instance. So we did everything we could try to do out there, but it was not it was an odd situation about the amount of traffic. But it is done, and it functions better now than it did last week or 2 weeks ago. So just sometimes those things aren't always perfect. And then Lastly, as you know, the crane is gone, and I just want to thank Mike Surratt and the police chief, because that was sometimes when you don't control everything that happens, that was done by a contractor, and they wound up putting the lane so close to the trees on the curbing that it really caused an issue there for a couple hours. And then Murphy's Law, there was a fire on the interstate, and it just forced all the heavy trucks right down Main Street at the worst possible time. So those two and myself came out there, and we tried to figure out a way to make it happen. And so fortunately, that thing's gone, and it's just a memory. We've got some great pictures of it, but we're moving forward with all that. So. And I believe that's everything I have for today. And then also, I did print your report. So the update for that engineering that the Public Works is doing with respect to the ongoing projects, that has been updated on the website on the Public Works page. But I also printed it for you because it gives you some graphics about some of the different projects that are ongoing. So that's attached to your report. The report will get posted to the internet tonight. Thank you.
And I'd like to remind the public that Mr. Cochran provides us with reports very regularly that cover lots of interesting material, and they're posted on the internet. So a lot of times, things that people have questions for concerning, they can go and read that report, and it's very thorough, and it lets you know a lot about the things that are going on in the town that you might not have thought about. So I encourage people to check that out. You'll learn a lot. It's really helpful. So we'll move on to council member reports. Does anybody have anything to report? The only thing I have to report is I would like to put on everyone's radar that we are going to have the first Washington County Day of Service on October the 14th, and there's a committee that's been working very hard to start this. It's something that is done in other communities. It's not anything we've ever done before in Abingdon, but it's going to be a community-wide volunteer event where we have lots of, we've reached out to lots of different organizations and lots of people in the community who might need help, and then we've also reached out to lots of organizations that might provide help. And so pay attention, there'll be a flyer, there'll be lots of Facebook, internet posting coming up, and so if that's something you would like to participate in, we have everything from writing thank you cards to some gardening projects to some projects that involve sitting. So it should involve all ages and all ability levels, and it's an opportunity to really give back to your community. So watch for that information. If there's nothing else, then I would think we should proceed to closed session to discuss legal matters and appointments to boards and committees.
I'd like to make a motion that we go into closed session as permitted by Virginia Code Section 2.23711A1 for purposes of considering applications for appointment to various boards and committees of the town, and also 3711A8 for consultation with legal counsel, which has been retained by this public body regarding a specific legal matter which does require legal advice.
I'll second that.
Okay, motion by Mr. Austin, second by Ms. Quetch. Do we have any discussion? If not, can we please call the roll?
Mr. Austin.
Aye.
Ms. Quetch.
Aye.
Mr. Wett.
Aye.
Vice Mayor Anderson.
Aye.
And Mayor Pillion.
Aye. Okay, we will now enter closed session.
back.
We're back. I think I'll talk with those two.
Back on the record. I'd like to move that we return to open session and that we certify, the town council certify.
I'm sorry, Mr. Ross, I need to do this separately.
Oh, okay. I'd like to move that we return to open session.
I'll second that.
So we have a motion to return to open session by Mr. Austin, seconded by Ms. Quetch. Is there any discussion? If there's no discussion, can we please call the roll?
Mr. Austin?
Aye.
Ms. Quetch?
Aye.
Mr. Webb?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Anderson?
Aye.
And Mayor Pilion?
Aye.
I'd now like to move that the town council certify that in closed session, it was just concluded that nothing was discussed except the two matters which were specifically identified in the motion to convene in closed session and lawfully permitted to be discussed under the provisions of the Virginia Freedom of Information Act cited in that motion.
Mr. Austin, do you so certify?
I do, I certify.
Ms. Quetch?
I so certify.
Mr. Webb?
I so certify.
Vice Mayor Anderson?
I so certify.
And Mayor Pilion?
I so certify. Okay, so we have some appointments to boards and committees to discuss. Do we want to do that all in one motion?
Yes, and I'd like to make a motion that we appoint Allison Mays to the Economic Development Authority and Jacob King to Sustain Abingdon.
Do we have a second?
I'll second.
So we have a motion on the table by Ms. Webb, a second by Ms. Quetch. I do that every single meeting. A second by Vice Mayor Anderson. I thought I'd made it through. Is there any discussion? If there's no discussion, will you please call the roll?
Mr. Austin?
Aye.
Ms. Quetch?
Aye.
Mr. Webb?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Anderson?
Aye.
And Mayor Pilion?
Aye. Okay. I will now adjourn this meeting. Thank you so much. I got through the whole meeting without messing up.